So, a written testimony. This is easily one of the weirdest experiences I've ever had listening to an album. Everything from the rollout to how long it took to make to even the music in itself. It was just so weird and hard for me to process it all. But after a few months have passed by, I think I've had enough time to process everything, and I want to give a ranking of every track from 10 to 1. Technically 9 to 1 since the overwhelming event I'm not going to count as a song, but I do want to share my thoughts on it. This intro really reminded me of a Griselda type intro, the very eerie atmosphere that was created here with a public speaker over it, this time being Mr. Louis Farrakhan. It really reminded me of Griselda. It's not really trying to impress you with anything, but it's just trying to set up what you're about to get into, and I think it was a great gateway into the first track, Goes to Soldier Slim. My favorite quote from the overwhelming event was, "Like any good lawyer in a courtroom, he tells you what he's gonna prove, and then he goes ahead and proves it, let the jury make the decision." And I think a lot of this can be connected to Jay Electronica's career at the moment. We've had a very long wait, there's been a lot of anticipation, and he has to prove himself. I think in here, the jury serves as the fans, as the critics, as us listening to the music. Has Jay Electronica done enough to prove himself for this long wait that he's made us endure while we get his debut album? Because it is his music, but once it's out there for everybody to consume, we the people get to decide really if he proved himself or not. And I think that's what made this intro so great, that it really sets up the album not just for what you're about to hear, but it really describes Jay Electronica's career at the moment. So my least favorite track is Flux Capacitor. And the main reason why I have such a problem with this record is that it sounds like the instrumental is trying to accomplish 25 things at once. Sure, there are certain sections about the instrumental that I enjoy. I actually really like the vocal sample here, especially in the outro. I thought that was very beautifully done and very well mixed. I also think that while the siren's a little bit overdone, it still does sound pretty great up until the latter half of its contribution, in which it just kind of seems to overdo itself. But what really annoyed me about this track is just that the rest of the instrumental just doesn't mesh well at all. It doesn't sound cohesive at all. The drum pattern is very weird. It sounds like it was taken from a separate track and just plotted into this one. And while I can like certain sections of the instrumental, like I said, when you put it all together, it just doesn't mix well. It doesn't sound cohesive at all, and it really just bugs the fuck out of me. And this is really a testament to how sometimes you're doing too much as a producer and keeping it simple fucking works, because in here it seems like they just try to overcomplicate things to the point where the beat is almost ruined. If it wasn't for Jay-Z's impeccable verse here, this would be such a skip for me. I loved his flow in this thing. The Backstabbers line was crazy. I ain't sweet as the old Jay. Jay-Z fucking killed this thing. And there's been a lot of talk about Jay-Z washing Jay Electronica all over this thing. I'm not quite on that boat. I definitely agree that Jay-Z had the better overall performances throughout the entire LP, but I wouldn't quite say he got washed, but this is one of those instances where he absolutely got washed. Flow-wise, cadence, to the bars themselves, Jay-Z just stole the show, and if it wasn't for him, I probably would never revisit this track. At number 8, I got The Blinding. This song is such a tale of two halves. You have the first half, which is just mixed terribly. Again, kind of like Flux Capacitor. There's sections that I like, but it doesn't just come together cohesively. The bass fucking bangs all over this thing. And when it first came in, I thought this track was going to be great. But then you get that really annoying reverse crash, I think it is. It's just a crash of sound that just continues throughout the beat and doesn't ever stop. And it's just so fucking annoying. And once again, if they kept things simple and just didn't have that, this song would be incredible. But I just can't get that fucking wall of sound crashing into my ears. I can't get out of my head, and it just annoys the fuck out of me. I wish I could just skip the first half altogether, despite the fact that Jay Electronica and Jay-Z are flowing between one another so well, and I think it's one of the best showcases of them having chemistry as artists, but it is just fucking ruined by that one fucking crash that they just decided to put in there for some reason. But the second half is completely different. It is mixed so well, the production is so lush, you have a Travis Scott feature that actually impressed me. I actually enjoyed a Travis Scott feature for once, and both MCs did great. I love the Jay Elec line when he says, "It's Mr. Headlines who signed every contract and missed a deadline." I immediately thought of some fucking Game of Thrones shit with Tyrion and Jon Snow when they're talking about one of them being a bastard and the other one being an imp, and how you have to wear that as your armor, and if you wear that as your armor, people can't use it against you. And I feel like that's what Jay Elec did there. Like, he knows that he's way overdue with this album, but he's just gonna wear like it's armor to the point where you can't really use it against him, which which makes that line not only great, but fucking hilarious. At number 7, I have Fruits of the Spirit. A lot of the instrumentals throughout the LP seem to build their foundation on vocal samples, and it really lays a lot of texture for everything else to come in with all the soulful sounds all over this thing. And Fruits of the Spirit is no different with the No ID production. And Jay Elect continues a lot of the same themes that he's proclaimed throughout the entire album, and performance-wise, he does ride the beat very well. I just personally wish that he would have taken this track, since it's his only solo song throughout the entire record. I wish he would have taken this time to sort of abandon the overall conceptual message that he's trying to portray throughout the entire album, and I wish he would have just focused on bars, just stacking those bars on top of one another, not trying to deliver a message, but just trying to be hard for that one certain bar. Just because it was that 1 minute and 30 mark, it was perfect. It didn't need a hook, it didn't need anything. I just wanted Jay Elect to go off, and while he did have a good performance, I mean, when you get lines like "A Field of Dreams is where they try to bury us," you can't complain too much. But I just love Jay Elect for how aggressive he was and how quickly he can grab you with the mic, and he still brought you that more laid back flow here, and I just wish he would have given us slightly more aggression and just take a hold of the mic and just spit his fucking ass off. But all in all, it's still a very solid track. So I have the last track at the number 6 spot. This is easily the most emotional song throughout the entire album. It's actually insane how emotional Jay-Z gets here. It's almost like he's about to start tearing up in the booth. Both MCs are referring back to the last moments that they had with certain significant others, them both having to deal with the fact that they have text messages and conversations on their phone that are never going to happen again. They're never going to continue, and they're having such a hard time letting that go. And they actually recorded the song the night that Kobe Bryant died, which kind of just adds to this overall emotion that this track brings. Jay Elect even touches on substance abuse with that Zanny bar, something that I haven't heard him talk too much about in the past. So I thought that was really interesting. And maybe it is the fact that I've been listening to so much Griselda and Rock Marciano to the point where my ear palette has just gravitated towards just wanting dudes to rap their ass off, and I've kind of catered away to the emotional type of rap just because I really just want to see you impress me with your vocal performances, not so much your subject matter, even though I still care a lot about subject matter. But despite that, the fact that they can still intrigue me with a track like this to close out this album, despite my ear palette straying away from this kind of sound, really shows how impressive this song is. And as a closer, I think it fits perfectly, and it gets me so interested about the future, about how Jay Elect and Jay-Z are working together with such great chemistry that I really hope they continue to make more music and work together moving on in the future. Ezekiel's Wheel. I fucking adore this beat. I've heard some people say that it drags on for too long and it didn't need to be 7 minutes. I completely disagree. The instrumental was perfectly spaced out for Jay Elect to just have fun over this beat. And when Jay Elect gets to that line, "My debut album with Hove, man, this is highway robbery, I feel like I hit the lottery," you can literally feel the joy coming out of his mouth, and it's almost contagious because I myself get so fucking happy listening to this song, especially at that mark. And while this may not be the most lyrical moment throughout the entire album, everything comes together so well because of the music, because of how good it sounds sonic. The Dream comes in with some beautiful vocals that mesh the instrumental perfectly, and the constant kind of crackling sound throughout the beat that kind of serve as like the kicks for the instrumental sounds so beautiful, and I never get tired of that sound. And I feel like this is the kind of track that I can definitely play over and over again and not really get tired of it. And I think they made the 7-minute mark very worthwhile. At number 4, I have the Shiny Suit Theory, and this is a track where I completely understand some of the anger that some people have towards this album. This is the same exact song that was released 10 years ago. It wasn't remixed at all. There's no new verses. This is the same exact shit that I heard in 2010. And I can totally understand the argument that some people have when it comes to this album sounding unfinished. But this is the interesting part about doing a track ranking. We're looking at just the song in itself. And if we look at Shiny Suit Theory as just what it is as a song, I can't deny its greatness. This probably has my favorite hook on the entire album. I love what Jay Elect did with it. It sounded super fucking catchy. And the beat, despite the fact that it sounds 10 years ago, and I guess you could argue that the mixing is a little bit rugged, I think it actually sounds pretty fucking cohesive with this album, despite it being made so long ago. But what really trips me the fuck out about this track is the fact that with all of the comparisons that Jay-Z has gotten with Makami throughout this entire album process, this is the song that I think mixing wise sounds the most like Makami. And we all know that Makami chooses very interesting mixing. Some of the people that don't like Makami, one of the main criticisms is the fact that he sounds so drowned out in the mix. And it's interesting the fact that this was made 10 years ago before Makami was even fully poppin', and you can still hear Makami renditions in this. Now, it would have been so perfect for me if Jay Jay-Z at least rewrote his verse and used the same type of mixing and kind of used that sort of Mac Homie-ish flow and delivery that he's been using in parts of this LP and put his own little flavor, kind of like he did with the rest of the tracks. I think it would have made this track a 10 out of 10. It would have mixed the two most intriguing parts about Mac Homie into one song. The mixing, which Mac Homie is very well known for, the low-key mixing, and the on and off again flow and delivery that Jay-Z kind of adapted here. And I know that Jay-Z would have put his own flavor into this because he did throughout this entire album. It would have made this track so fucking perfect. But even with all that said, it's still incredible and easily one of my favorite moments on A Written Testimony. With Universal Soldier, the intro really made me feel like I was getting into a Doom type of track with how eerie and villainous that Hiroshima news report sounded, but it quickly changes gears to a very powerful and uplifting and probably the most grandiose and epic moment throughout the entire album. And I love how they were able to do that switch so effortlessly here. I love Jay-Z's verse here, especially how he opens it up saying, "Back when Amore Jones was catching a Fed charge, I knew less about Chesimard, all about Pablo Escobar." And this really shows Jay's growth and the fact that back then and earlier in his career, he was so infatuated with drug dealers because that was his lifestyle. And now that he's gotten older and he's been able to inspire people in different ways, he's more gravitating to someone like Chesimard, who is Tupac's godmother and a very proud freedom fighter. And I think this just shows Jay-Z's growth. And we both know that Jay-Z's constantly growing, not only music-wise and MC-wise, but also as a person. I feel like that's very important to what Jay-Z is standing for throughout this entire album. Jay Elec also comes in with a great verse. I mentioned before how Jay Elec used to just grab you as a listener very quickly as soon as the track started, just because with how heavy and aggressive he sounded and how mean he sounded. And I feel like this is the closest we got to that throughout this entire album. I also love the line, "Some of the cons I suffered for pros." Really good wordplay from Jay Elec. I think this is a line that you could use against some of the people that are saying that Jay Elec was just rapping terribly, which I really don't know where that argument came from. Obviously, this isn't prime Jay Elec, but I don't think anyone should have expected that coming into this album. At number 2, I have the Neverending Story, and this is easily my favorite instrumental here. Alchemist only had one appearance, but he stole the entire fucking show. It sounds so fucking beautiful. We have been waiting so long to finally hear a Jay-Z verse over an Alchemist instrumental, and it was everything that I was hoping for. Jay Elec also sounded very good over this production. He did have a little bit of a stumble around the 2-minute mark where it kind of seemed like he was just trying to jumble too many words together. This is around when he mentions again Louis Farrakhan. His flow just kind of went off for a little bit. He should have probably just taken out a few words so his delivery sounded a little bit better. But despite that, everything else about this track is fucking perfect. And yeah, I have to mention again that Jay-Z did outdo Jay Elec here, especially flow-wise here. I feel like all over this thing, Jay-Z was just finding much more interesting pockets to flow on than Jay Elec was. And at this point, with Jay-Z being 50 years old, I think this just proves that this man refuses to be washed. You've seen a lot of his peers just kind of fall off musically and sonically, but Jay-Z just refuses to go down that path, which I think is just a testament to Jay-Z's greatness. And throughout this thing, he's doing that stop and starting flow a lot. It might be the most obvious example of the Mac Homie renditions, probably right next to Ghost of Soulja Slim. But again, despite the amount of times that people mention Mac Homie with Jay-Z and this album, if you think he sounds like Mac Homie, I really don't know where you're coming from. I have to mention that again, because this is why I enjoy about Jay-Z so much. He put his own flavor into it. Mac Homie could not do what Jay-Z did here. Same way Jay-Z couldn't do a lot of the stuff that Mac Homie did, and that's why Jay-Z chose to put his own flavor into it, because it sounds original, but it also sounds better than just straight up copying another MC style. And finally, the best song for me in this album, easily Ghost of Soulja Slim. And here's the thing, I know a lot of people get really mad about Drake just straight up copying other MC styles, and I've seen a lot of Drake fans getting mad like, oh, why do you get mad when Drake takes someone's style, but when Jay-Z does it or some other MC does it, it's okay. And this is the fucking difference. Drake, when he takes someone's style, he waters it down. He doesn't put any originality into it. And it just seems like I would have rather just had the other person do this, because you didn't put any Drake into it. You didn't put any individuality into it. It's the complete different case for Jay-Z. Like I've said it over this entire video, do you really think Mac Homie can spit this fast? It's almost like Jay-Z took Mac Homie's style, made it his own, and then added an entire element, which is the cadence and the speed that I'm gonna rap at. That is what's gonna separate me from being compared so much to Mac Homie, because I'm gonna make it my own. And that's exactly what he fucking did. You mouth off for the cameras, I make a silent movie. Again, Jay-Z just went the fuck off. It feels so weird just constantly talking about Jay-Z and was supposedly supposed to be a Jay Elec album. But you just can't deny the fact that if it wasn't for Jay-Z's contribution, this album would have been so half-assed. And it's not because Jay Elec did anything wrong, it's just that he isn't nearly as present, it seems, as Jay-Z, and it's his own fucking album. And Jay Elec did great here. He had another good verse. But when you stand next to Jay-Z, when he's bringing in an entire new style style into his already great career, it kind of seems like it's a Jay-Z show here. And there's a huge elephant in the room here of, can we really consider this a JLX studio album? And I guess in the record books, it's going to be considered a JLX studio album. But for me, this is 110% a duo album. I think this is just as much a Jay-Z album as it is a JLX album. And like I said, I probably wouldn't even come back to this thing if it was just JLX. And that's what kind of makes this look like a very bad move in JLX's part. I hope that he can come through in the future and give us more projects that he can solidify himself for how great of an MC he is. I hope this isn't his last note, because that would be a very bad look for him. But all in all the bullshit aside, I really fucking enjoyed this album. It might not be exactly what I wanted, but are you really gonna get exactly what you wanted with any JLX release? At this point, probably not. So I'm happy with what I got, and I just hope I get more music from JLX in the very near future. But that's all I gotta say on that. Please let me know what you thought about a written testimony, about Jay-Z being all over this thing. How do you feel about JLX moving forward? And yeah, please like, please subscribe, please ring that bell so you get a notification the next time I make another video, and I'll be with y'all very soon. Thank you all so much. Peace.